Nyanji Jimbo Zordon Ningmi Zoner Monum Jimboring of Javda Bakar Dargam Sando Sherma Dor Tumba to Jejan Laki Jom Sar, Nature Roars and Jankams, Jawar to Egyptian of Yella. Jimmy Panzo Jala Soran, they are going to Tobam Power Shinji Lo
The supreme, profound, and sublime Dharma is difficult to encounter in a billion eons. Now I see it, hear it, receive it, and kept it. I vow to attain the true meaning of the Tathagata. In order to liberate all sentient beings, let us generate the supreme bodhicitta. Let us now begin our class on the teaching that's composed by Lirab Limpa, that is called Brief Explanation of the Three Supremes. For Larongar, or for the practitioners in Larongar, the Lamas and Jomos had already studied this text, the Tibetan Lamas and Jomos, that is, and to those who had already studied it, they really felt this is quite an important text and it is of great benefit. For that reason, I'm going to give the teachings to all of you as well, the Chinese practitioners, because lots of the Chinese practitioners also requested me to give the teachings on the Three Supremes. For people who study for a long period of time in Larongar, I'm sure it's easy for you to understand, but can you actually practice it? Can you walk the walk? This is the question. When you compare the teachings to your own mind stream, can you actually practice it? Or when you make observation of yourself, have you truly merged these teachings with your mind stream? All of you sitting here, when you, and if you can study it and if you can take these teachings into your heart, this would be very beneficial to you. All of you who are listening to this teaching right now must consider yourselves as the Mahayana practitioners. And many of you probably would say that, of course, I'm a Mahayana practitioner. We had studied teachings given by Longchenpa and by Patrul Rinpoche, by Khenpo Khenhua, and many different masters talks about the Three Supremes. This is really important. They talk about it because the Three Supremes are really important. The aspiration and then the rededication of merit as well as the actual practice. These three aspects are really important. And especially when it comes to Nimapas, we definitely place great importance in it. This particular teaching is called a brief explanation. This particular teaching is rather quite brief compared to, for example, the Domang Tertong Dechin Limpa. His explanation and teachings on the Three Supremes is considered as an extensive explanation of the Three Supremes. I really hope those of you who are listening to this class right now, or those of you who receive the recording of this teaching, could understand the Three Supremes. Because without the Three Supremes, then the practices that we engage in could fall into the categories of Hinayana practices, or even the practices to gain worldly benefits. That would be such a pity. As Mahayana practitioners, we definitely understand that our practice should not be degraded into the Hinayana practice or into the secular and worldly practices. But sometimes, without understanding the Three Supremes, then our practices could very much be degraded to the worldly practices or to gain worldly benefits. Now, let us look at this text that is taught by the Tertong, the great Tertong, Lirab Limpa. We all know that Lirab Limpa was the previous reincarnation of Pontsuk Rinpoche. It was around 1856. The great Tertön Lirab Limpa was born, and then he passed into parinirvana in 1926. He lived in this world for 70 years. Ever since he was little, he had the exhibition, or he exhibited the disposition of being a turtle. Ever since he was very little, he constantly had illness, and a great turtle named Bemaden considers him to be extremely extraordinary. But his father, Lirab Limpa's father, didn't want him to get ordained and become a monastic. His father was a hunter and would often take him to hunt. There was once when he was hunting while Lirab Limpa was aiming the animal, different kinds of dakini words started to manifest. And then after he returned back from that hunting trip, he got ill. After being ill for a period of time, once in his dream, he dreamt of Ikajati. And Ikajati used her white fan pierced into his heart, and his illness was then healed. And slowly he matured and grew up. His disposition also matured. It was about when he was a teenager, he relied on various kinds of spiritual teachers such as Sonam Payang, as well as the great teachers such as Jianwen Khyentse Wangpo, Gongzhi Yunten Jiangco, as well as Mipa Rinpoche, Pachu Rinpoche, Nyushu Longto Rinpoche, all of them. And then he studied from Mipa Rinpoche on Madhyamika, and then he got more and more well known. In Khon area, around 33 years of age, he was invited to Lhasa, and he bestowed empowerments to the 13th Dalai Lama. And it was introduced in my book, A Journey to the West. Later on, with the invasion into Tibet from Mongolia, as well as the British, as well as the Britons, all kinds of political outlook started to get very complex. And then Lirab Limpa went to Lhasa. Lirab Limpa in Lhasa, he revealed various kinds of terma, including from Potala, from Samye. He engaged in various kinds of retreats and practices, also revealed various termas, and he propagated a dharma over there. There were lots of wrathful Padmasambhava practices, as well as Hyagriva practices. A great number of termas that's of great benefits to the sentient beings. And then later he reviewed a terma around this area, which is Sirta. And after he revealed that terma, not long after that he revealed that terma, he passed into parinirvana. There are over 20 volumes of termas that is still available nowadays. Tsuchun Rambo Toku in the past composed a extensive biography that is of 700 pages. Pontsuk Rinpoche once said that the particular biography is rather quite maybe too extensive, because there are detailed records of where he reviewed what terma.
要这个一看就一翻开就里面有很多的这种成就像啊，就是这样的否则的话
Ponsku Rinpoche back then really liked the brief biographies such as the biography of Khenpo Ngachung. That is why the way I composed the biography of Ponsku Rinpoche is rather quite brief, because Ponsku Rinpoche said it would be easier to see the exhibition, the exhibited realizations from the Tertong Lirab Limpa. I'm not sure if this particular extensive biography is available in English language. I believe there is an extensive or rather extensive biography of Lirab Limpa in the Chinese language. I'm sure there are other translations as well. Now, the great Tertong Lirab Limpa composed this text. I really hope that all of you would be able to read this closely and carefully, and then especially I think it would be of great benefit if you can closely observe your own mind stream, to observe how your mind arises, and I think this would be quite a great practice. Over here it says that at times of practicing the genuine Dharma, firstly, we need to closely observe mind stream. When it talks about practice, it doesn't necessarily mean engaging in retreat and meditation practice. Practice could include a variety of practices or virtuous deeds, such as circumambulating stupa, using prayer wheels, chanting, and maybe serving the Sangha as well. Maybe serving the Sangha as a protector of the gates, or maybe just going to work. Going to your worldly work could be a practice as well. At the very beginning, you need to make observation of your own mind stream to recognize that if your mind stream is filled with desire, greed, aggression, and pride and jealousy and ignorance, all of those kinds of poisons, if your mind is filled with all of those poisons, even if you were to sit among the Sangha and listening to Dharma teachings, your so-called practice or so-called whatever action you're taking in is still a cause for suffering. This is a cause to be reborn in samsara, or to continuously be in cyclic existence, and it could be such kinds of poisonous mind stream is the root of all the degenerations, all the negative karmas. It is just like that if your mind is tinted, if your mind is tinted, then it is like food that is mixed with poison. Whatever kinds of so-called virtuous deeds, such as making offerings of incense and maybe engaging practice and so on and so forth, if your mind is not virtuous, then even if all the virtuous deeds would become unvirtuous as well. So at the moment that you notice that your mind is not virtuous, you need to right away eradicate that unvirtuous mind. Whatever has passed is past. It doesn't really make much of the influence to the moment that is now. In Tibetan, we would say that the men often boast about how brave they used to be, and women tend to boast about how beautiful they used to be, but all of those kinds of remnants are simply the past, and they're of no use. But of course, if you had already engaged in virtuous deeds in the past, and then you can think of it, or whenever you reminisce about all the negative deeds that you did in the past, you can engage in confession now, and that would be beneficial. When we talk about that was about the past, and then let's talk about expecting the future. The future does not follow whatever we wish for, so there is no need to expect the future. From a worldly point of view, of course we need to have plans and goals and so on. But at the time of practice, you should not put too much emphasis in what is going to happen in the future. Otherwise, you simply become the father of the son that you imagined. And if you were to think of the future too much, that could become an obstacle as well. At present moment, the key is that we should not be distracted in any of the inferior objects, such as the object of desire or aggression and so on. If at the present moment your dualistic thoughts are completely wild, if the thoughts of aggression and desire and ignorance kept on gushing out of your mind stream, in that way, such kinds of mind or such kind of mindset would become the obstacles to stop virtuous deeds and to increase the negative deeds as well. That is why it is said that we should not chase the future or reminisce the past or abide in the so-called now. Rather, our mind should abide in the virtuous deeds. So that is why we need to forcefully eradicate all kinds of various dualistic thoughts of the three times. All kinds of dualistic thoughts that is bind into the three times of the past, the present, and future. Rather, what we should do is to practice wholeheartedly and increase our intention to practice virtue. And we need to wholeheartely and with great focus to engage in practice the genuine Dharma. We need to practice in such a pure way. For example, during our Dharma assembly, I think it is important for you to attend all 4 sessions completely. If you really couldn't attend all 4 sessions, at least you should complete the sessions. What does it mean to complete each session? That means you need to start all the way from the beginning, that is the making the aspiration of bodhicitta, till the very end of dedicate your merit. So you do things properly and thoroughly and completely. If you can do that, then you can be considered as a practitioner. In fact, this is a norm for the previous great masters, but for the generation that is, to the now generation, it seems that the so-called practitioners can hardly practice in such a perfect manner. The practitioners nowadays has all kinds of defects and imperfections in their practices. So we need to compare ourselves, our own intention, our own mind stream, and our practices to the descriptions that's composed by Aryabhata Rinpa. Now, this is the way that we should practice, how we should practice, and then let's look at the Dharma that we practice. The Dharma that we're practicing is taught by the great teacher, that is the Buddha, the peerless Shakyamuni Buddha, who completely knows the truth of all phenomena, and he knows that if you were to plant the seed of virtue or plant the seed of vice, then you would receive the corresponding fruition, that is bitter or of joy. Shakyamuni Buddha completely understood or realized this particular truth. After knowing this truth through his realization and understanding, then he gave the teachings on this truth to people of various capacities, completely and without any error. He gave teachings to the Hinayana practitioners and to the Mahayana practitioners who were of such a capacity to guide the sentient beings onto the path of omniscience and realization. After studying the praises of the Supreme, I'm sure you gained a certain understanding that Shakyamuni Buddha's Dharma teaching, or his teaching, is true and is completely compatible with different kinds of people of different capacity, and he gives the correct teaching of the genuine Dharma to all sentient beings. So over here it says that the Buddha Dharma has 84,000 Dharma gates and 12 classes of sutras. Also, you can categorize the teachings given by the Buddha into the Nayanas. So there are different ways that you can categorize the teachings given by the Buddha, because the Buddha's teachings are vast, and the noble teachings are of great numbers. In the Tripitakas, there are 104 volumes or 108 volumes. The Chinese Tripitaka, on the other hand, for example, the Qianlong Tripitaka or the various kinds of versions of Tripitakas, there are different kinds of volumes or different kind of categories as well. In the past, when we listen to the oral transmission of Tripitaka, it takes about 5 to 6 months to receive the oral transmissions. And Master Nanhuai Jin, he studied the Tripitaka in Mount Omei for a very long period of time as well. So through that, we can see that the Dharma teaching is of great vast variety and of great vast quantity as well. But in this teaching, we see that this is a brief teaching that comprises the gist of all the Dharma teachings. It is as if you were to walk into a library that is full of the Buddha's teachings. You would get lost. You would not know where to start. But from this teaching, we can see that this teaching is so easy to understand, and it has all the pith instructions. Also, it is so convenient for us to receive the pith instructions. We need to understand this is the value of this particular teaching. Because in this teaching, it talks about the different practices corresponding to people of different capacities. Such kinds of teachings that is taught by Atisha, by Tsongkhapa. For example, Lambrin also talks about the three aspects or the three different paths that helps the practitioners of the different capacities. Now, the path for the ones of little capacity, then that is to generate faith, to cause and fruition. And the people of middle capacity, they need to generate renunciation and not to grasp onto the cyclic existence. People of great capacity need to practice bodhicitta that longs to benefit others. So we can say that for the ones with a little capacity or the small capacity, they need to generate faith, and then the ones of middle capacity need to generate renunciation, and the ones of great capacity, they need to have bodhicitta. Now you can compare yourself. Look at your own mind. Do you have faith? Do you have renunciation? Do you have bodhicitta? What do you have? If you do not have any faith to the existence of samsara, then you cannot say that you have faith. Then you are not of the ones of the small capacity. And then you need to contemplate whether you want to renounce from samsara, whether you still have a grasping towards samsara. If you still grasp onto samsara, then you do not have renunciation. On top of that, you need to make observation of your own mind and see whether you want to benefit the others. If you don't, then you don't have bodhicitta. So if you don't have any of the three, your mind stream is probably not ripened yet. If your mind stream is not ripened yet, what is the point of seeking for the high teachings such as Maha-Ati and Mahamudra and so on? The Dharma is, of course, really supreme. Mahayana, the Maha-Ati and the Mahamudra are of the great capacities, but if, as a practitioner, you do not have the supreme, if you do not have the ripened mind to receive those teachings, then that is of no use. In another word, the Rinpoche continued to say that for the ones with a small capacity or with inferior capacity, they seek for better rebirth, for higher rebirth. They want to be born as a celestial being or being born as a human being again or with better birth. And for the ones with middle capacity, seek for the peace that is taught in the Theravada tradition or in the Shravaka, or the realization of the Shravakas or the Pratika Buddhas. They would consider that as the path of liberation. For the Hinayana practitioners or the Theravada practitioners, they would consider such kind of peace that is attained by Shravakas and Pratika Buddhas is considered as a liberation. But such kind of liberation, such kind of realization is not the ultimate realization. For the kinds of practitioners with great capacity, their path to tread on is the Mahayana path. And if one can practice in such a way, they would be able to attain the perfect enlightened mind that is of full omniscience. That is the path to attain such kind of fruition. Through the pith instruction or through the key that is bodhicitta, that is the mind of benefiting others, then all kinds of practices could be transformed into the practice of Mahayana. If you have the mind, the altruistic mind, to practice for all sentient beings, then all kinds of practices are the practice of Mahayana.
我学了这个半辈子的这种佛，但是实际上我还可能没有真正的进入到大乘的话呢。
There are people who practiced maybe for many decades, but if your mind is not of the altruistic mind, then your practice is not considered as a Mahayana practice. If you have the opportunity to study the five treatises and study quite extensively, of course, with that kind of conditions, with those kinds of opportunities, it would be wonderful. But if you don't have those opportunities to study extensively into the five treatises, study these three supremes is really wonderful for you. Now, after you tread onto the path of the ones with great capacity, it has the three different aspects too, or three different categories. For example, that is the far path, the near path, and the swift path. Now, the far path points to the causal stage of Sutrayana, and then the near path points to all kinds of common vehicles such as Kriya Yoga and Charya Yoga, and so on, that is shared by all the new translation and old translation schools of Vajrayana school or Vajrayana sect. So those kinds of practices, including the generation stage and the perfection stage, all of those kinds of profound paths. The swift path specifically points to the pinnacle of all the yanas, the pinnacle of all the 9 yanas, that is the Mahāti, that is the Dzogchen, the effortless and uncommon, unshared, and peerless path that is only to the early translation Nyingmapa school. It is not to say that since this is the pinnacle of all schools, you should seek for it. You need to remember how Milarepa first studied Mahāti, but it didn't attain realization, and later he studied Mahāti and practiced in Mahāti tradition and then attained realization. So you have to find whatever is the best for you. And it is also said that all the near path is to have the sacred outlook, and Mahāti is the swift path that effortlessly led one to abide in the self-arisen awareness. To abide in such a naked realization, not being tinted by any kinds of objects. This is the practice of Mahāti, the effortless swift path.
那么这样呢，就是这些所有的教义和还有这个道次第的话呢，都不会超过这个教法和正法这两个。那么教法呢，
Now all the teachings and the path, the systematic path, do not surpass of the two. What are the two? The first one is the teaching, and the second one is the realization. In terms of the teaching, it talks about all kinds of words and teachings and speech that could explain the Tripitaka. In terms of realization, it is the
所以呢，它这里就是先宗和密宗，密宗当中的话呢，也是特别的这个大圆满的法。任何修法呢，
let it be the Shrayana, the Vajrayana, or the Mahāti. In fact, any kind of the Dharma teachings needs speech or needs language to explain, but this language should not be parted from the actual practice. That being said, if you do not understand any of the words or sentences, then realization is quite far away. It's very difficult to attain if you don't even understand it. It is not possible for you to attain realization if you don't even understand the words. Now, on the other hand, though you perfectly understood all the language, all the words that describes the practice, but if you do not engage in actual practice, then it is meaningless still. All of you, if you only study but not practice, then you simply become a machine to attend exams. It seems that the fellow Sangha members, some of you only place great attention into study and the marks or grades you get from exams. I'm not saying that those are not important. Exams are important. Debates and discussions are important. But after that, you do need to put all of those teachings into practice. Because if you do not put those into practice, it is not going to benefit your own mind stream. It is not, the Dharma is not going to change your own mind stream. So you need to understand that the wish fulfilling jewel, that is the genuine Dharma, can save and liberate and alleviate all kinds of sufferings of cyclic existence. I'm sure all of you who studied the Dharma know that studying the Dharma alleviated lots of suffering of yours. It could alleviate the relative suffering that happens temporarily and could ultimately alleviate the suffering of samsara. This is through the power of dependent arising. So if you continue to practice in such a way, one would be able to attain higher rebirth, such kind of fruition. Also, one would be able to finally attain ultimate liberation and attain all kinds of qualities and power of omniscience, as well as skillful means. That is without deceit. So we need to have firm and devotion. We need to have firm devotion and faith to constantly focus on the steady contemplation and practice of the genuine Dharma. I'm sure people place different kinds of matters as their priority. There are people who place business, study, or tourism, or traveling as their priority. But we as practitioners, we need to place practice as our practice. We need to place steady contemplation and practice of the Dharma as our priority. If you were to study, contemplate, and practice by yourself without engage in practice at all, if you were to only study, in the sense where you study for the sake of study, then it is of no benefit. So the advice is that before, so it is
就是因为全世界来讲的话呢，确实这个上市是很重要的，实践的老师也是很重要的。
So it is advised that before seeking
知识要学的话呢，就是不管是你学这个裁缝也好，学这个实践的一个技术也好，或者说是以一些这个理科也好，这个文科也好，
qualified Lama who is the follower of the root teacher, that is the Buddha, one need to make close observation and seek wholeheartedly. It means that one need to make close observation of the teacher first, because if the teacher is excellent, then the disciple could be excellent. There's an opportunity for the disciple to be excellent. If the teacher is not proficient in the particular field of the studies, then how could the disciple and the student to be excellent in that field? According to the Treasury of Wish Fulfilling Joy, it is that there is a particular chapter on how to rely on a spiritual teacher. It says that before you make the connection to the Dharma teacher through the Dharma, you need to make close observation of that teacher. You need to seek for the teacher. It is not that you should run after the teacher who gives empowerments here and there. Nowadays, people would make close investigations of the backgrounds of the kindergarten teachers. And people would scrutinize the teachers that they rely on if they want to study certain skills or traits. Then why don't we spend time and effort in making close observation of the Dharma teacher who will make lifelong and even lifetime and after lifetime of connections to those Dharma teachers? After making close observations, we need to rely on the teacher in such a way that we should not lie to them, we should not lie to them in our hearts. On top of that, the ones with the superior capacity who rely on a teacher need to follow the teaching exactly as they're taught by the teacher. And then the ones of the middling capacity would serve the teacher with their body and speech. The ones with the inferior capacity should serve the teacher by making offerings of material providings. One should rely on teacher in such a way. If you were to encounter qualified lamas such as Phuntsuk Rinpoche and so on, you need to rely on them wholeheartedly and follow them according to how it's taught. What is the goal of relying on the teacher? It is to seek for the Dharma teachings that is taught by the Lama and that is already practiced, and the Lama through their practice had already attained realization through those teachings. We need to, after seeking those teachings, we need to practice it. If the Lama do not have any of those precious teachings or do not attain realization through those teachings, it is simply like an empty bottle trying to pour into another empty bottle. After relying on teacher, after studying it this way, one need to study until one attains a full realization, a full understanding, and no need to seek for other people anymore. No need to seek for the help from other people anymore. That is the extent we need to reach through our studies or rely on the teacher. After studying for 8 years, 10 years, and for a period of time, time, we need to fully and completely understand the Dharma teachings given by the Dharma teacher. We should not be content with only understanding half of the teaching. We need to be a copy of the teacher, just like a copy that's made from a mold, a tata mold, a tata statue. From different kinds of molds, we can make the copies of various materials nowadays, but in the past, usually from a mold, you can make a copy of mud. That is the traditional material. So, you need to be a copy of your Lama. If your Lama has a great capacity in propagating the Dharma, then of course the disciple should study in such a way. If the Lama is quite prolific, then the disciple should be that as well. Very similar, at least, to the Lama. Maybe not all of the qualities, all of the virtuous qualities of the Lama, but at least very similar. So we need to be similar to our Lama. Whenever we encounter a qualified teacher, a virtuous teacher, we should at least get some of the qualities or copy some of the virtuous qualities from such a Lama. Even if we can't be completely like the copy of the Lama, we should be just like how one should color the felt, coloring cloth. There are different colors of felt, the Tibetan felt that's made of wool, and then when relying on a teacher, our mind stream would change slowly, just as how during the process of dyeing a piece of felt, maybe a person at the very beginning had lots of inferior qualities or flaws in the characters, but slowly, by relying on the teacher, the character or the personality would change, just as how the cloth or the felt would slowly change colors in during the process of dyeing the cloth. Without such change, if your mind stream does not change, even if your teacher or your Lama is a Dharma king or a realized master of Maha-Ati, but if your mind stream does not change at all, if your mind stream does not have any influence from such a great master, if you had received great teachings from such a great master, Dharma doesn't seem to place any imprint on such a person. If this person's mind stream is still filled with jealousy, aggression, and so on, just like Devadatta, who relied on the true body or true nirvana kaya of the Buddha for 24 years and was able to recite and expound the 12 classes of sutras, there is really of no benefit to Devadatta. In the Tibetan language, it says that I have already relied on you and served you for 25 years. Other than the difference that I do not have the array of light, we are exactly the same. So, since we are exactly the same, I am no longer going to follow you. That is stated by Devadatta. And after leaving the Buddha, he became a hungry ghost in a garden. This has been taught in words of my perfect teacher and in the Parinirvana Sutra as well. In the Kingdom of Ancient India, it says that if you do not sleep, then the ghosts would be here to capture you. The parents usually would scare the children in such a way. And Devadatta once tried to scare the Buddha as well, to stop the Buddha from giving the Dharma teachings at night. But after hearing it, the Buddha was not fearful at all. There's another story that the Buddha's footprint is of virtuous qualities, and it is really beautiful. There are different patterns on the footprint of the Buddha. And Devadatta was really jealous of the footprint of the Buddha. So he was not happy to see those beautiful patterns, so he tried to erase them. And there was another time that Devadatta thought that the non-Buddhist schools, their teachers has more virtue and are of the most noble within this world. And then the Buddha said that, well, they're not, because if they were to drink this and that water, they would die from it. And Devadatta right away went to that non-Buddhist teacher and said that, oh, you should not drink water, otherwise you would die. So that teacher listened to Devadatta and did not drink for 7 days. After 7 days, he drank a sip of water and right away he died. Even after such incidents, Devadatta did not develop even a little bit of faith to the Buddha.
很好的这个修行啊，没有修行的话，那产生各种邪见，就是最后呢，就是堕入恶趣当中。所以呢，他这里也讲了，
Devadatta did not practice while he served the Buddha for over 2 decades. And because of that, he generated lots of wrong views. And because of his wrong views, he was reborn in lower realms. That is an example to show that it doesn't matter how great your teacher is, if you do not engage in practice, if you do not follow the teacher properly, then the consequence for your next life would still be quite dire.
讲的一样，就是法就是非常非常好的，但是你这个法就是很好的话，也不一定。
Now the Dharma is really wonderful. And if you were to receive the wonderful dharmas from the teacher who are qualified, but such kinds of supreme dharma is not enough. To receive such a supreme dharma is not enough. The key is that you need to change, you need to have a pure mind. A kind mind for a practitioner is more important. If your mind is kind, is pure, and you have the altruistic mind to benefit others, it may appear to be a very menial virtuous deed, but because of your pure mind, your altruistic mind, the virtue and the merit would be vast. Some people may only chant the money mantra, and maybe another person received some really high and supreme teachings and some pithy instructions. Simply by the look of it, it seems that the one who chants the money mantra is only practicing an inferior or a very simple practice. But the true criteria is actually on how mature, how kind the practitioner's mind is. If you were to have a vicious mind, then even if you practice diligently and practice various dharma, but with a vicious mind, though all of those practices are not genuine dharma. Practicing for 9 years, for many years, for practicing various categories of teachings are useless still, and for that reason, Lera Blimpa said that I composed this particular text. This is the introduction of this particular teaching. And then he continued to say that according to the teachings of the great Dharma teachers of the past, or great masters of the past, out of all the Dharma teachings, the method of practice is the most important. Whatever kinds of practice, Sutrayana or Vajrayana, the most important is to make close observation of one's own mind stream and to adjust one's intention and aspiration. So all of you who are sitting here in the audience, you need to adjust your intention in listening to the Dharma. Whatever kinds of Dharma teaching you're listening, the Hinayana, the Mahayana, the Vajrayana, and we have different classes here, the 5 treatises, the Vajrayana classes, and so on. Whatever Dharma teachings you receive, you need to make observation and think, what kind of intention do I have? What is my goal? You need to make observation of it. This is really important. What does that mean? It means that there are different kinds of intentions. The first intention is, if you were to practice to seek for longevity and health, to seek for comfort and happiness, those are simply the aspiration to seek for the benefit of this lifetime. There are people nowadays who go to retreat and who practice meditation for health and for longevity, or for wealth and for status and for happiness and peace for their own family, for the longevity of the parents and all the family members. All of those kinds of goals, those kinds of intentions are the kinds of intention to seek for benefits for this lifetime, and such kinds of intention only brings benefits that in fact has the self-nature, upholds the self-nature of faults or of degeneration. But this is very common nowadays. People practice purba, who practice circumambulation of the stupa or of mountains, their intention is to have health, to have longevity, to have status, to have wealth. These kinds of intentions, not only it would not bring benefits to liberation, it does not even bring benefits for your next lifetime, because your intention is to bring happiness for this lifetime. It is like shooting an arrow. If your goal or the target is somewhere that is very close to you and you're shooting towards that target, that is all you can achieve. You won't be able to hit the target that is far away. On top of that, not only they're not going to bring benefits for your next lifetime, sometimes it doesn't even bring benefits for this lifetime of yours, because all of your intentions of being healthy and live long and so on, such intention is mingled with the intention of greed and so on. All of those poisonous intentions. For that reason, because your intention is poisonous, then the fruition would be poisonous as well, or would be tainted. For that reason, if you were to have such tinted intentions, then by relying on the genuine Dharma, you would only be able to attain the fruition of further cyclic existence. It is like to use the genuine Dharma to accomplish only very small goal, just like asking a king to be a beggar. On top of that, people who practice in such a way, they sometimes would fall into the lower realms to have such kind of fruition. Now, since you have the intention to attain longevity and health, you would be able to attain that through the power of genuine Dharma, of course. But after health and longevity, what then? What awaits for you is simply the result of being reborn in lower realms. Whenever we go to different monasteries, whenever we see people who make aspirations, and when we notice when we make observation of those people, the majority of them, their intention is to gain happiness of this lifetime. Not only for people in other monasteries, for all of our Sangha members here, at times of making prostrations or chanting mantras and so on, you should avoid such kind of intention of gaining happiness in this lifetime only.
或者说是这个带着这个今世的这两个性的话，都属于是一个不善的这个发心当中啊，就是也发现有三种
other teachings, it states that the kinds of intention that is tinted with the aspiration to gain happiness for this lifetime is considered as the vice intention. Now let's look at the second intention, which is neutral intention. If one makes an aspiration, or if one has the intention to practice that is without contemplation, without aim, without goal, that is without awareness, without mindfulness, that is simply mocking the others' behavior or mimicking others' behavior, that is the neutral intention. Then in such a way, doesn't matter what kinds of Dharma practices that you engage in, or doesn't matter how much you practice, they are not of the true path either, because your mind at that time is not virtue or vice. You're simply not paying attention. You're simply following other people's actions. Oh, this person's going here, so you follow them. That person goes there, then you follow that person without any intention. You're listening to Dharma class because the other person's listening to a Dharma class that is the intention without a sense of purpose, because you're not paying attention at all. In such a way, the path you practice upon is not the true path either. The third type of intention is to be liberated from the three vices, or the three lower realms in future lifetime, to be spared from the fear of reborn in the three lower realms, and to gain the better rebirth in future lifetimes. This is the intention of the ones of small capacity. Those are the practitioners of Hinayana practices. People who don't want to be reborn in lower realms and want to... Oh, in fact, this is not even Hinayana. This is the practice that does not lead to liberation or to attain omniscience. Rather, they only want to attain a better rebirth. This is this is the third one. And the fourth one is that to seek for the fruition that is attaining the fruition of Arhat, to be spared from the cause and fruition of suffering, to be spared from the suffering of the six realms and the three existences. This is the kinds of intention that is rather quite self-centered. The Arhats usually would think that I want to attain liberation for myself. That kind of intention is very selfish. If you have such intention, it doesn't matter whatever kinds of Sutrayana or Vajrayana practice or even Mahāti practice. With such kind of intention, you would only be able to attain the liberation of the lower yanas. That refers to the fruition of Arhat, or attain the realization of the realization of emptiness of self. Lots of practitioners over here, maybe they study Mahayana, or the Mahāti teachings, but they had never thought about benefiting other beings. Then that is the intention of an Arhat. That is not going to make the Mahāti or Mahayana teachings into the Mahayana teachings. For that reason, for those of you who wish to seek for omniscience and complete liberation, you need to uproot all of those kinds of intentions that's stated above. You need to eradicate all of these previously stated intentions. At the beginning, if you want to generate genuine bodhicitta, it is a little bit difficult. But once you get accustomed to it, then it is easy. Out of the intention, for example, I wish to benefit all sentient beings, therefore I am listening to the Dharma class, I am translating, I am doing various kinds of activities. Once you get used to it, it is easy. This is really the key. If you have the intention of Mahayana, then you would be able to practice everything following the path of Mahayana.
就是说这个三殊胜色测的大大小小的一切善根，所以我们在这里呢，应该是大家的这种善根辩证呢，就是辩证不过的因素。那么这个呢，就是一定要有三殊胜的色测，不管是大的善根、小的善根，什么样的善根，但这个不同，主要是以这个三殊胜来色测。那三殊胜是哪三殊胜呢？啊，大家都知道，发心呢就是加心呢就是发心殊胜，真心呢就是无眼殊胜。
What are the three supremes? The first supreme is that the supreme supreme of intention, the supreme of actual practice, and the supreme of intention. Now, the first one is to have the primary practice that is generate in a supreme intention. Firstly, you need to generate a bodhicitta. It is the intention of great vastness, because your intention is to benefit all sentient beings as vast as the space. And the intention is to let them attain the omniscient fruition of Buddhahood. If you would be able to practice in such a way, to generate such intention, then even if you practice the Hinayana path, then because of your intention is different, such kind of Hinayana practice becomes the cause to attain full omniscience. Hinayana teachings such as Abhidharma and so on, at times of studying it, we know that the texts belong to the category of Hinayana or Theravada. But if you were to practice it and study it with the Mahayana intention of benefiting sentient beings, may I be able to benefit sentient beings through this study, then it becomes the study of Mahayana, or it becomes the practice of Mahayana. Now, another way of generating such intention is that I do want to have longevity, then what should I do? Then the key is to make such intention that may I live long so that I can benefit sentient beings. People nowadays seem to despair the Hinayana teachings. People would say that, oh, well, for mindfulness is a practice or the teachings of Theravada tradition, it is not of a high teaching. And if I were to give teachings on the humanistic Buddhism, then people would say that, oh, that is worldly Dharma, it is of no use. But the Dharma, in fact, does not have high or lows. It is our intention to have high or lows. Because of the difference of our intention, the Dharma teachings would become Hinayana or Mahayana based on the difference of our intention that is stated by Atisha. All the Dharma teachings is very much based on our intention. It is based on our mind. The Dharma, whatever kinds of Dharma that we receive depends on our mind. The ones of lower capacity, if the ones of the path of the lower capacity, if practiced with the intention of Mahayana or intention of altruistic aspiration, then it becomes the Mahayana path. If our mind were to generate true bodhicitta, then we would be able to practice anything, and they would become the Mahayana path. That is why we need to practice and study the Dharma following the systematic approach, which is study, contemplation, and practice. Whether one activity is of virtue or not, it depends on our intention. If your intention is quite small or quite narrow, quite limited, then your activity, even though may seem to be vast but not of benefit to others, the practice practiced by a person with genuine bodhicitta and someone without genuine bodhicitta, the difference, the result would be very much different. The result is not necessarily based on how it seems to be. For example, how many disciples you have or how many activities you've done, but the intention of all of those activities. So I think this Dharma teaching is so important. We need to again and again ask ourselves that, do we have bodhicitta? And we need to help, we need to generate bodhicitta through understanding the merits and qualities of bodhicitta. Khenpo Tsotrem Lodro recently had given teachings on the importance of bodhicitta, the preciousness of bodhicitta, and had bestowed the bodhisattva vow to all of you. So you need to contemplate it again and again, and then actually place the practice of generate the intention of bodhicitta, generate bodhicitta as your ongoing practice through your walking, sleeping, and standing, everything. If you can remember that, then whatever you do is of the Mahayana practice. If you do not have such intention, then even if you were to practice the highest teachings, maybe such kinds of practice are still of the Hinayana or sometimes even a secular practice. So I encourage you to generate a bodhicitta in whatever activities you have, to serve the Sangha, to study, to go to work, and so on and so forth. It's easy to be said than done. I understand that. Sometimes we need these kinds of teachings because it is so sharp and it is so penetrating that reminds us that we need to generate a bodhicitta. On the other hand, we should also rejoice ourselves that we at least know the importance of generating bodhicitta. I myself translated and give teachings to all of you out of altruistic mind. I think I do not seek for any benefits from doing all of these activities, at least. But people are different. There are people who can easily practice bodhicitta, and there are people who can hardly generate even a little bit of altruistic mind. There are people who easily study the high teachings, and there are people who studies the Mahayana teachings with great difficulty. But whomsoever you are, or whatever kinds of practitioner you are, I think studying this text would be at least of a little bit of benefit to you, or would be of various levels of benefit to you. I try my best to give teachings, to give this teaching to you, to remind you that generating intention is really important. Now we should stop here today.